Welcome to Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet with Ryan Potterack from Potterack Capital Advisory. You have unique values, objectives, fears, life experiences, and biases. Any financial professional who ignores or minimizes the importance of your story may not be able to help you achieve your ideal outcomes or hit your goals. It's time to experience the PCA difference. In this podcast, we help business executives, soon-to-be retirees, and solutions-based individuals overcome the anxiety leading up to their upcoming years. We do this by initiating in-depth discussions about the financial aspects of retirement, like tax planning and asset allocation, alongside, and often overlooked, personal and lifestyle aspects. Join us for this journey where we explore retirement from a contrarian point of view, as Ryan draws from years of experience and qualified guest professionals to help you explore the true purpose of your money in retirement and the impact you want to make in your golden years. Ryan Potterack and Alec Quaid offer investment advice through Private Advisor Group, which is a federally registered investment advisor. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Private Advisor Group and Potterack Capital Advisory are separate entities. This information is not intended to be a substitute for individualized legal or tax advice. Please consult your legal or tax advisor regarding your specific situation.
Welcome, everybody. Hello, Charisse.
Hey.
We're going to get into this Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet podcast, but you're the one firing the questions at me. So where are we going today?
Well, we have a really interesting subject. It's around purpose after retirement.
Well, that sounds interesting to somebody I know who's very focused on purpose, as you are, and I know that really it hasn't been that long since you retired. If we can kind of somewhat put you on the spot, how long has it been since you've retired, and how would you say purpose fits into you and Mike's life?
Well, first of all, I hate the word retirement. I try not to use it.
Yeah.
And I know you have a phrase, paychecks to playchecks, which I align with. I think for me, I stopped working in July of 2021 in my business. I just shut the business down because I was caring for my mom, who has since passed. And it didn't scare me at all because I am also an artist. And I knew that because I wasn't going to do the work that paid me a lot of money, I would have the work that pays me no money. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And so we've been really good at it. However, my husband, Mike, took a little longer to get adjusted. He's a pretty regimented guy, and he did not have a hobby like art. But he has the hobby of the honey-do list, which keeps him quite busy. So I recommend it.
Yeah. I agree with you on retirement, because it's just, first of all, it's a familiar term to everybody, but the meaning of it to each individual or couple can be very different. For my meaning, Charisse, it's always been about being in a position where I don't have to work to provide for my lifestyle. Being in a position, well, and actually even more clearly in my head, it's about freedom. When I feel I have the freedom to do that. And then I'd also sprinkle in where I've always looked at, thankfully, at my work in my career as kind of a fulfillment of God's gifts and a legacy to my children and setting an example and all of that. And I just feel like I have more to offer the families we serve and others and maybe some listeners to this podcast that I'll never meet or possibly meet. So that's kind of my look at it, as opposed to, putting in a requisite number of years to get to a pension or the filing of Social Security, that sort of thing. But I don't think there's any right answer, but retirement is kind of a very, very broad term in my experience.
Yeah, I just equate retirement with getting super old and inactive, and I'm only 63, and I stopped working at 60. So yeah, I like that. And it's time freedom for me. That's the biggest benefit. And I do know, I have friends actually who were really concerned when Mike and I both stopped working because they knew that Mike didn't really have a purpose. And we've had many conversations about that. And it's really, I mean, he hasn't struggled at all. Maybe I'm his purpose, Ryan. Maybe that's why he's not struggling. I don't
I've
know.
always viewed it that way.
So anyway, let's get to my first question.
Okay.
How does financial planning connect with the emotional and psychological aspects of stopping work?
I would say it's I mean, 34 years in this industry, it's not surprising to me anymore, but I still find it fascinating that um, really successful people, wealthy people, and people from all different careers and walks of life, the concept of retiring or walking away from employment, it's always out there. And I mean, for me, I was thinking about retirement when I was a teenager, but it's out there for people, if not in their 20s, their 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe a little bit after that. But it's not necessarily thought of as real. And then there's the day-to-day grind within a career, within relationships, within the family, so on and so forth, that I find that people do not go through a financial planning process oftentimes to assimilate all of the information, all of the resources, to even get an accurate assessment of their retirement readiness. It is just, I mean, it just happens so many times when we actually enter a financial planning process with a couple or individual, and we ask for a lot of documents and such, pension, Social Security, all kinds of different stuff. When we put that together from our vantage point and then share that information with them, it is almost unanimously surprising to the receiver.
Yeah, it was to
I
us.
just find that really, really interesting. I think the industry does a disservice in portraying retirement readiness as a certain pile of money, kind of the do you have enough?
Right.
Because by characterizing retirement readiness as do you have enough, I think the individual or couple will always question that, but it's the wrong target. If it's a pile of money, then it depends from couple to couple. Do they have a pension? Do they not have a pension? What is their Social Security retirement benefits? One case to another case. You know, the thing about, I've owned my own business for a long time. A lot of people who own their own business do not take money as much through salary. And it's the salary that makes the Social Security contribution. So you can have two wealthy people. One has modest Social Security retirement benefits. Another one has very high or large pension, no pension. And then you get down to the personal choices that different individuals and couples make. And to me, the most important metric or number that I can get from somebody wanting a retirement readiness assessment is, okay, what is your lifestyle cost? Do you spend $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month, 15, 20, whatever that is? That's the target. Is if you can do everything you want to do, Charisse, but not have to do blank, go to work at such and such a time, X number of days a week, whatever. That's the target. It's really about cash flow. That's how people live their lives, working or not working.
Yeah. How do you, excuse me, in those conversations, how do you have that initial conversation with someone who's looking at retiring about purpose? Does that come into play during your process?
For sure. It is. I think possibly what has changed, let's just say the people that I've talked to in the last 10 years versus 15, 20, 25 years ago, maybe in our parents' generation, your career was more static. You went to work at a place. Oftentimes, you may have worked at one place the entire career, maybe two or three. Maybe there was a pension. And I don't like the terminology of work-life balance, but I think in recent decades, something along those lines, people think of their life outside of their work. They define themselves other than their career and career accomplishments. And so I think that today's couple or individuals contemplating retirement, I think has a mindset that is more ready
Yeah.
than the past. Because our clients, when I look back, the clients that at this point have more life experience, less young, they were in many ways, and I'll include my parents or my dad anyway, they were fearful of it. Now, having helped so many individuals and couples make that transition, I've heard fairly early on in retirement some of the words that you've shared is, I don't know, gosh, I don't know where I found the time to work. It's going great. I've said many times in other podcasts on slightly different topics, is for 2 or 3 years into retirement, I feel like I'm convincing our client it's okay to spend their money. So for many couples that we work with, and I mean most, 80% plus, they're in a position financially to retire. And I'll define that as being able to live their lifestyle and live their lifestyle plus without having to go to work. But emotionally, they're not ready yet. So as we have a couple kind of targeting that, we'll have more frequent visits with that individual or couple just to reassure them on kind of maybe what they have in their head as a worst case scenario, but also get into that discussion, Charisse, of purpose. Help them to visualize, okay, you don't have to wake up and go to work on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so on. What is it that you want to do, not have to do? And for me, that's a very exciting aspect of my work, because I can see it better than the client can, that they have freedom right there at their doorstep. And so kind of helping them discover that in real time with questioning and listening is really, really cool.
From the other side of the table, it's nothing short of a miracle, because I remember our process. I remember I'm a believe it to see it girl, and my husband is a see it to believe it guy. And so the first time we went through our numbers, I was like, oh yeah, shoot, let's do this. And Mike, on the other hand, was like, oh, I don't know. And he had to see the numbers several times. And I imagine that's pretty typical of couples. I'm wondering though, like, do you address fear? Because that's what it is. That's what it was for my husband. He had to see it to believe it. And 3 years in, he believes it. But
Yes.
Do you address that part of it specifically?
Absolutely. And I find this won't be surprising to you, but most of it stems from childhood.
Mm.
It stems from them growing up. Oftentimes, because we do have quite a few wealthy clients that grew up very poor.
Right.
Or had circumstances in which they felt they looked at the world from a scarcity mindset, which creates fear. Also, incidentally, with my wife, Dawn, she's very much like Mike. You have to prove it to her, and I have complete faith until somebody messes it up.
Right.
So there's probably a good dynamic balance there for the respective teams. But it's kind of a joke in our family for our children, our adult children, because some of the comments Dawn will make, they'll say, they'll kind of say, oh yeah, you're penniless, Dawn, you're penniless. And so it's kind of an inside joke where there's a bit of, I say this with all love and respect, there's a bit of Chicken Little about what might happen. So I think fear is not unusual. And even, we take a situation, Charisse, where we have a couple, or one of the two, but in the household, significant income. So they're working, a lot of income. They're also able to do whatever their profession is with a lot fewer blood, sweat, and tears, because they're good, they're experienced. And it might be an income level that they would have not even dreamed about 10 or 15 years ago. So you have that mental aspect. Well, even if there's not fear, really, do I walk away
Yeah.
from this $250,000 income or whatever the number is, and it's really a relative number to that household's
Yeah.
history, that's pretty difficult to do. Now, not surprising to you, my questions are very straightforward. You know, I'll even make comments like, you know, health rarely gets better. We're also not going to live forever. You know, so when you're targeting, when the industry targets, do you have enough? They also then typically say, live off of the interest and dividends from the pile of money. That's kind of 101 that most people are familiar with. And I'll ask the couple, I said, so who gets the pile of money in the end? You know, if you're going to just live off the interest and dividends, that's a strategy if you were going to live forever, but you're not. And so when you pass away, you can't take it with you. So who's going to get the pile of money? And so that just kind of start. And my objective is to kind of frame their thinking is, well, wait a minute, you earn that pile of money. That pile of money is yours. So what if you spent more than the interest and dividends and you started dipping into that pile to have more family experiences or whatever it is that you enjoy? The thing that we just want to make sure, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, is that pile never gets to zero in your lifetime.
Right.
So it really is, it's much more, the numbers from my standpoint are pretty easy to assimilate and share with people. But yes, there's still disbelief. So it's really the emotional side that we're working out. Now, I'm not a licensed psychologist or anything like that, but I know how to ask questions and I know how to listen. So that's probably a bigger part of the process than the numbers.
Can you tell me what's the most inspiring story you can remember that went from, I don't know what the hell I'll be doing, to living their best life?
Well, it's a great question. It may be too good of a question because then my mind goes about 8 different directions. Well, I guess I don't know that I've got a specific story. I think a question that comes to mind is, you know, what are activities or things that you have enjoyed in the past, but no longer can do or feel like you have the time to do. And so you have musicians when they're young. I have a client that comes to mind who plays the guitar in a band. You know, so that's pretty cool. Or somebody who views themselves, as you did, they're as an artist when they were younger. And so by me trying to cull that or plow that ground of, you know, when you were a kid, when you were a young adult and you had time and less responsibilities as you look back on it now, what were those activities that you might want to rekindle? A common thread for many, though, is especially more so when there's close families, and thankfully I found that most financially successful families are a little bit closer, is helping them with focusing on experiences with the people they love. And then we get into a bit of a conflict, I'll put it that way, where spending, as an example, I don't know, 20 grand to take 2 or 3 of the kids and the grandkids, all of that, to Disneyland or Disney World or something like that. They have to get by the number. And we've helped a lot of clients get past the number. So it's not an inspiring story. It's so much to your question. It's an inspiring result that I've brought about many times.
Yeah, you did. You brought that about for my husband and I. And also, I think your point about experiences, I think as we get wiser, experiences become more essential than things. And so from a financial standpoint, there's a balance between like the experiences that Mike and I want to have and the ones we think are financially out of reach, because we kind of sometimes want things that are out of reach. So how do you navigate that conversation with your families?
It's it's a tough sale, I'll put it that way, to bring reality to a couple that they're not going to live forever. So somebody in their early 60s, and I just try to break it down logically, is okay, let's just say you have 3 decades left. This first decade, active energy, desires, maybe bucket list stuff, all of that. Then the second third, as you enter in maybe early 70s to very early 80s, you may be playing a little bit of defense with health issues, desire, to travel, particularly if you got a lot of the bucket list travel out of the way in the first third. And then that last third, it might be, hey, a good book, good glass of wine, and not feeling as many aches and pains is a really good day. With the grandchildren coming over. And just so typically in the industry where they say, okay, here's the spending, let's say in your early 60s, and then we're going to inflate that up over time, over 3 decades. But by doing that simple illustration, it assumes that you're doing the exact same activities in your 70s, 80s, and 90s. It just costs more. So we do see an acceleration typically, or we see continuing to be active, and some of these activities do cost more in the first decade or so, but then spending tends to level off. It's just, I like travel, but I don't like fighting airports as much or connecting flights. And so it's just trying to, with my experience going through that with so many great people, is just try to see the future for them, because we're really talking about human nature here.
Right.
When you, what comes to me when you said inspiring, but I don't think it nails your question, but it is inspiring to me that there's been 2 clients in which the husband had less than 2 weeks to live. And I'm at their kitchen table holding the hand of each husband respectively with their spouse and some of their family right there. And they're telling me to take care of their family. That sticks. That really sticks. And that's happened twice where I'm right there. And yes, in both situations, within a week or 2, they were gone. And so I bring that back around to retirement, is that, it's kind of trite, but each day is a gift. And so helping them understand that you cannot take it with you. Very simple stuff that people understand it intellectually, Sharice. They don't understand it necessarily in their heart. Yeah. And in their behavior. And that's a kind of a never ending objective or battle of me. And I don't mean battle in a negative sense, but just to really be an advocate for my client in helping them evolve their mindset around their wealth that they've attained and what is its purpose.
I think the conversation you had with us many times, we decided to front load our planning, because what you said is true. When I'm 80 years old, I am not going to be doing what I want to do now. And I call it front loading. You probably call it some other technical term, but we definitely spend more money now than we will. And I think it's pretty awesome to have a guy like you who plays a role like that in the life of your families. So thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. And a question I've asked hundreds of times is, which is your higher priority? Your money has 2 destinations. Is it your money for your fun and lifestyle, or your money being passed on for somebody else's fun and lifestyle?
Oh, hell no. We're spending every single penny that we can spend. Well,
and there's no right or wrong answer. And it's not 100% that they agree with your position.
Right.
It's probably 99%. But the answer, as I tend to do with my questions, is I try to make it bilateral. And then it's a sequence. Okay, if that's the way you believe, then you don't have to preserve the principle. That's a strategy for your heirs. And that's good too.
Mm-hmm. Well, if we spend the money with our children in experiences, they're getting the value. That's how I see it.
That's how I see it too. The kids might just prefer to get the check. I don't know. It depends. It might be a different answer.
Depends on which kid, probably.
Yeah. Dawn and I have 7 between us, his, hers, and ours, and that probably wouldn't be unanimous. Mm-hmm. So, well, any other questions before we get on with our day?
I think that seems like we're wrapped up there. You answered some questions that I didn't ask.
I got a bit emotional on the
I know.
inspiration stuff, but
On a Monday.
For those listeners who want to learn more about our firm, Potterack Capital Advisory, you can go out to our website, www.potterack.net. That's POTERACK.net. We keep historical podcasts and blogs and other information there. Also, Anna Hopkins has worked with me for over 17 years. If you want to get more directly acquainted with me, then she will make sure that happens. We're out there on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, I guess X. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to sharing the next podcast with you. Thank you so much, Charisse.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. To ask questions about topics covered during the show, or get a copy of Making It Count, Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet by Ryan Potterack, visit www.potterack.net or give us a call at 704-366-5776. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Potterack Capital Advisory. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Potterack Capital Advisory does not offer legal or tax advice. Please consult the appropriate professional regarding your individual circumstances. Nothing contained herein is to be considered a solicitation, research material, an investment recommendation, or advice of any kind. The information contained herein may contain information that is subject to change without notice. Any investments or strategies referenced herein do not take into account the investment objectives, financial situation, or particular needs of any specific person.
Product sustainability must be independently determined for each individual investor. Potterack Capital Advisory explicitly disclaims any responsibility for product suitability or suitability determinations related to individual investors.